The third phase of a driving while intoxicated investigation is the roadside investigation. And of course, this is what most people think of when they think about DWI investigations, because it includes typically the 3 standardized field sobriety tests. But let's start slightly before the field sobriety test and talk about the officer asking you to exit the vehicle. The officer, when they ask you to exit the vehicle, is once again observing how you get out of the vehicle. Now, there are many reasons why a person might be slow to exit. There might be many reasons why a person walks slowly or with an unsteady gait. So for example, you've pulled over on the side of the road. You don't know what the road conditions are or the surface conditions are, what the recent weather conditions were, what your footwear is at the moment, if you are even wearing shoes or you're trying to put your shoes back on. So as you get out of the vehicle, there could be many innocent reasons as to why your gait or stance is unsteady. But the officer, looking through his lens, is going to say things like, this person was slow to get out of their vehicle. They held on to their car as they exited. Their gait was unsteady. As they stood there, they were swaying. The police officer is not writing things down like it was a windy day. There was a slope to the road. The shoulder of the road was a different surface than the road, and it was several inches lower than the surface of the road. The officer is not going to make a note of what your footwear was. Is it different walking in heels on the side of the road after a late night versus you're wearing sneakers or tennis shoes? It's up to you and your defense attorney to watch the video, and if there's not a video, for you to talk to your attorney about, these are the things that might have limited my mobility in that moment, or my position or my stance. Similarly, an officer is not asking about your medical conditions. Lots of people have had knee surgeries. We all have different levels of what our normal physical capabilities are, and even our own normal physical condition changes throughout the day. I may not be as spry at 2 in the morning as I was when I got to work at 8 a.m. that day. As you're reviewing what the officer has put down about you, even before we get to standardized field sobriety tests, you need to communicate with your attorney and you need to evaluate what else was going on. What was the officer ignoring that you know to be a truth that unless you or your attorney pointed out, no one else is going to understand? The officer will typically have you position yourself somewhere between your vehicle and the police officer's vehicle. The officer should look for as level a surface and as safe a position as they can find for you, and typically they will face you away from traffic so that you're not looking at traffic as they begin to ask you some additional questions to see if you're a good candidate to take at least the first field sobriety test and to give you the instructions on how to actually perform the tests. The officers do this for a number of reasons. First, they want to ensure you're safe and they're safe, but they're also making sure you're on camera. Even if you are in a small jurisdiction where they somehow still don't have body-worn cameras, you will have a dash cam that will be pointed at you. It is almost unheard of these days to have a driving while intoxicated case with no video. Typically, we're going to see video from the body cam, often from multiple officers who are on scene. We're going to see dash cam, which is the camera from the police officer's car pointed over the hood and at you, and that can be changed depending on where you're standing. And we'll often see a cam from inside the police car if you are in fact arrested. Your transport and how you act in that backseat is also going to be recorded. So the officers placed you in as safe a position as they can. They're not under an obligation to get you to the safest place. So just because there's a nearby parking lot that would be much safer for you to be in doesn't mean the officer has to take you there. These are field sobriety tests, meaning the officers are supposed to be able to do them out in the field. It'll be up to you and your attorney to point out things like an unlevel surface that you had to walk on or stand on, or the fact that it was windy, or the fact that you were wearing footwear that was a detriment to what you were trying to accomplish. Let's talk a little bit about the standardized field sobriety tests that police officers are trained on and how they're supposed to be administered. The 3 tests are: first, the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. That is a test of your eyes. We'll talk about that in depth. Next is the walk and turn test. And finally, the one leg stand test. The walk and turn and the one leg stand are considered divided attention tasks. These attention divided tests are testing whether or not you have the normal use of your mental and or physical faculties. So now is an appropriate time to talk about the definition of intoxication in Texas. Intoxication means that a person has a blood alcohol concentration of a 0.08 or greater. That's a definition most everyone knows. Or the person has lost either the normal use of their mental faculties or the normal use of their physical faculties. Understand the term normal is not defined anywhere. Additionally, these definitions are not dependent on one another. In other words, most people think you have to be a 0.08 or greater to be intoxicated. That is not at all the case. You can be a 0.04 and intoxicated in Texas if the prosecution can prove even at that level you had lost the normal use of your mental or physical faculties. Notice for those last two definitions, not having the normal use of your mental or physical faculties, it is not even related to alcohol. This is why a person can be prosecuted with no alcohol in their system. You could have only prescription drugs. You could have prescription drugs and alcohol. You could have recreational drugs. You could have any combination of those things because Texas doesn't require any specific intoxicant. What is different, however, is we don't have certain cutoffs for different drugs, whether they're prescription or recreational. To use marijuana as an example, there is no set level of THC or THC metabolite that will always result in a person being intoxicated. Instead, what the state in those types of cases has to prove is that there's an intoxicant in your system and the symptoms or what they were seeing indicated to an expert that you did not have the normal use of your mental faculties or normal use of your physical faculties. An expert for purposes of the arrest is, of course, the police officer, but ultimately that decision gets made by a fact finder, either the judge or the jury in your case. Let's break down the questions, requests, or essentially orders that an officer is giving you at the scene. First, when an officer asks you to exit the vehicle, you do have to exit the vehicle. The officer is going to make it sound like their request for you to do standardized field sobriety tests is not a request. They're going to make it sound like this is something you have to do, you're required to do. The reality, and of course hindsight is 2020, is you do not have to comply with their request to do field sobriety tests. And if you don't do the field sobriety test, there's no adverse consequence. They have to either continue with their investigation through some other means or with what they already have. But there's no negative implication for you like you would have for refusing a breath or blood test. So my advice for anyone who's never been in this position, as you talk to your friends and family, is to never do standardized field sobriety tests. One of the most important questions that the police officer is going to ask you on the side of the road, if you admit that you've had something to drink, is what time was your last drink? If you answer that question, the police and really the prosecution are going to go through this fuzzy math called retrograde extrapolation if they have a breath or blood test at a later point in time to say, based on the admitted time of last drink and a known breath or blood alcohol concentration at some future point, we can do the math to go back and say, at the time of driving, this is what the person's blood alcohol concentration would have been. This fuzzy math is fraught with problems because most people don't understand. In fact, no one has reason to understand the significance of the answer to that question. And most people answer, did you have anything to drink? Yes. How much did you have to drink? A couple of drinks. When was your last drink? About an hour ago. We see those answers so often, and yet the police and prosecutors treat that like it were the gospel, and the person who gave the answer knew the significance of that answer. Once again, as we talk about things that you are not required to do, you are not required to answer the police officer's question on the side of the road. And I hope that you would tell your friends and family, if they're ever stopped for suspicion of driving while intoxicated, that they would not let their friend answer police officers' questions about what they had to drink, and certainly not what time their last drink might have been. People often wonder whether officers give portable breath tests either before or after they do field sobriety tests. That practice has largely been abandoned in Texas. The reason for that is if they give you a portable breath test, that small device that you breathe into, that is not allowed in court for your blood alcohol concentration. It can only be offered for the purpose of showing there was alcohol in your system. So it's a yes or no about the presence of alcohol. Well, that's not really that useful for police officers because they're just going to say they smelled the odor of alcohol in your breath. Or Going back to the contact at the car, they're going to say, when I approached the vehicle and asked the person where they were coming from and if they had anything to drink, they admitted to me that they'd been drinking. So you really don't see portable breath tests even being offered on the side of the road in Texas. Some smaller jurisdictions still have them, but what you're going to see by and large is even if a person asks to give a breath test on the side of the road, they are not going to be given the opportunity to give a breath sample. Instead, the person will be arrested and taken to a jail, and the jail will have a large intoxilizer machine, which is a breath testing device. So as we talk about these standardized field sobriety tests, we're going to talk about not only how they're supposed to be administered, mistakes officers make, but also how it relates to what the definition for intoxication is in Texas.